Today's Iran has fashioned itself into one of the premier military and diplomatic powers in the Middle East and Saudi Arabia's principal rival over the entire region. It has achieved this with a mix of policies, amongst them deft diplomatic maneuvering, a tactical alliance with Vladimir Putin's Russia, and the provision of arms, advice, and cash to Shia militias across a variety of countries. In the latter case, Iran has pioneered a seemingly unique strategy that combines insurgent and state power in a potent mixture, a strategy that is evident today in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. One man is recognized as the principal architect of each of these policies: Major General Qassem Soleimani, longtime chief of the Quds Force, a crack special forces battalion of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Although revered in his home country and feared on battlefields across the Middle East, Soleimani remained virtually unknown in the West. Yet to say that today's Iran cannot be fully understood without first understanding Qasem Soleimani will be a considerable understatement. More than anyone else, Soleimani was responsible for the creation of an arc of influence, which Iran has termed its axis of resistance, extending from the Gulf of Oman through Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon to the eastern shores of the Mediterranean Sea. Today, with Assad's impending victory in his country's calamitous civil war, his Iranian alliance became stable enough that Qasem Soleimani could drive his car from Tehran to Lebanon's border with Israel without being stopped. And as the Mossad chief, Yossi Cohen, once pointed out, the same route will be open to truckloads of rockets bound for Iran's regional proxy, Hezbollah. On a normal day, the most powerful soldier in the Middle East shies away from bloodstar. Indeed, he typically tends towards self-effacement. In meetings with everyone from local warlords to the Ayatollahs to the Russian foreign minister, Major General Qassem Soleimani sits quietly in the corner and takes it all in. When he speaks, he does so politely, simply in a soft pillow tenor. He refuses all attempts at hero worship, refusing, for example, to allow admirers kiss his hand. One American journalist who profiles Soleimani calls him almost theatrically modest. One day in the summer of 2018, Soleimani's modest facade dropped to be replaced, albeit by righteous anger. The source of his ire was one which many Americans might relate: a furious tweet from Donald Trump. On this particular occasion, the object of Trump's wrath was Soleimani's nominal boss. During a speech in Hamdan, a city 200 miles northwest of Tehran, Soleimani tore into Trump with unusual bombast. He scolded, he wagged his fingers, and he yelled, despite the half-dozen news microphones in front of him, a relatively modest crop given Soleimani's celebrity status in his home country. The US president made some idiotic comments on Twitter. It is beneath the dignity of the president of the great Islamic Republic of Iran to respond. So I will respond. As a soldier of our great nation, you threaten us with a measure that the world has not seen before. First of all, it has been over a year since Trump became US president, but that man's rhetoric is still that of a casino, of a bar. He talks to the world in the style of a bartender or a casino manager. Soleimani's audience responded in kind, where typically they will hear his words in reverent silence, occasionally interjecting pro forma Islamic revolutionary slogans. On this occasion, they laughed and clapped and whistled and hollered and even heckled as if watching a stand-up comic. Then came the threat from Soleimani. Mr. Trump the gambler, you are well aware of our power and capabilities in the region. You know how powerful we are in asymmetrical warfare. Come, we are waiting for you. We are the real men on the scene as far as you are concerned. You know that the war will mean the loss of all your capabilities. You may start the war, but we will be the ones to determine its end. If anyone was in a position to make such brazen threats, it was Qasem Soleimani. For the best part of 20 years, he enjoyed the unmediated ear of his country's supreme leader, Grand Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who called Soleimani, uniquely among all Islamic Republic's heroes, a living martyr of the revolution. Abroad, he had made himself the confidant of political leaders in Damascus, Beirut, Baghdad, and even Moscow. The US government branded him a nuclear proliferator, a supporter of terrorism, a human rights abuser, and a leading suspect in the 2011 plot to assassinate the Saudi ambassador to the United States by bombing a Washington, D.C. restaurant. While most Americans and Europeans may never have heard the name Qasem Soleimani, their intelligence services wished it came up less often. Little in Soleimani's personal background could have hinted at the power he will one day wield. He hails from a village in the mountains of Kerman province, a region in Iran's southeast, not far from the borders with Afghanistan and Pakistan. In Kerman, tribal politics traditionally have held far more sway than any edict of the central government 500 miles away in Tehran, owing to a botched land reform introduced by the Shah as part of the White Revolution. Soleimani's father, a small-time farmer, wound up owing the government around 9,000 riyals. This debt, which was only on the order of $100, seems to have brought the family to the brink of ruin. In order to help pay down the debt, Soleimani left school at 13 to labor on construction sites in the provincial capital, Kerman City. By the time the Islamic Revolution erupted in 1978, he had become a technician with the Municipal Water Authority. Prior to that point, the young Soleimani had shown little, if any, interest in politics. But he joined the IRGC shortly after it was founded in April 1979. At any rate, he must have impressed someone, for immediately after completing basic training, he became an instructor of new recruits. That was the moment Qasem Soleimani began his remarkable upward trajectory. In many ways, Soleimani's rise from provincial obscurity to the heights of power paralleled Iran's regional ascendancy over the past 40 years. His frontline career began in the turmoil that followed the Islamic Revolution, when his unit was sent to the northwest to quell a Kurdish separatist uprising, a mission regarded to this day as a badge of honor with the IRGC. It was in the course of that effort that Soleimani, just 22 years old, first encountered a 23-year-old political operative named Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, then acting as an advisor to the regional government. Nearly 30 years later, Ahmadinejad would go on to serve as one of the Islamic Republic's most hardline presidents, with vocal support from Soleimani. In September 1980, Saddam Hussein's Iraq opportunistically invaded its neighbor, hoping to capitalize on the post-revolutionary chaos. Initially, Soleimani was sent back to Kerman to raise and train troops, but he soon found himself redirected to the front lines, where he volunteered to spend extra time. Soleimani served throughout the war in almost every part of the front, from the retaking of Bostan in 1981 to the invasion of Iraqi Kurdistan in 1987, during which Saddam Hussein's forces attacked his unit with chemical weapons, to the climatic expedition to the Al-Faw Peninsula in April 1988, whose failure helped precipitate the ceasefire that ended the war. Soleimani developed a reputation for treating the men under his command well. He made a habit of returning from behind the lines reconnaissance missions with live goods and other provender to feed his men, earning him the admiring title, the Good Chief. On many occasions, he publicly questioned the decisions of his commanding officers, but this insubordinate streak did not prevent him from rising to the leadership of the IRGC's crack 41st Division, nicknamed Tarallah, meaning Vengeance of God, an alias of Imam Hussein, the grandson of the Prophet and one of the key figures in Shia Islam. He was starting to attract attention from the very top. A photograph from the period shows Soleimani seated on the floor, enjoying a meal at the right hand of the then President Ali Khamenei. Following the close of hostilities with Iraq in 1988, Soleimani was sent back home to Kerman to wage war on the drug gangs threatening order in the region. Like the United States war on drugs, it was a bloody campaign. But within 3 years, forces under Soleimani's command had pacified the province, earning him the lasting gratitude of his residents. Little is known about the next 6 or 7 years of Soleimani's life, but by March 1988 at the latest, he had risen to become commander of the Quds Force, the lethal special forces unit of the IRGC, tasked with bolstering pro-Iranian regimes and militias abroad. Soleimani excelled at this task, establishing or strengthening contacts with Shia militias and political parties across the region, as well as the regime of Bashar al-Assad in Damascus. At the same time, the then newly installed administration of Mohammad Khatami put him in charge of managing Iran's burgeoning confrontation with the upstart Taliban movement in neighboring Afghanistan. In August 1998, a few months into Soleimani's tenure as the head of the Quds Force, Taliban swept into the northern Afghan city of Mazar-e-Sharif, home to the substantial community of ethnic Hazaras Farsi-speaking Shia Muslims. The Taliban initiated a brutal pogrom against members of the minority, trashing homes, raping women and girls, and massacring hundreds of Shia men and boys. Among the dead was a group of 9 Iranians, 8 diplomats, and a journalist. At this naked provocation, factions on both sides turned white hot for war. The IRGC's overall commander at the time, Yahya Rahim Safavi requested Supreme Leader Khamenei's permission for the punishment of the Taliban to advance to Herat, a city in western Afghanistan, annihilate, punish, and eliminate them. Iran began massing an invasion force of almost 250,000 soldiers along the Afghan border. Reportedly, it was Soleimani who stepped in and defused the situation without resorting to further violence. Instead of confronting the Taliban directly, Soleimani opted to throw increased support behind the opposition Northern Alliance, personally helping to direct the group's operation from a base across Afghan's northern border in Tajikistan. It was the model of proxy of warfare which he would return to again and again. In the months following after 9/11, Soleimani saw an opportunity to defeat the Taliban once and for all by unconventional means, namely cooperation with the United States. Early in the war, he directed Iranian diplomats to share intelligence on Taliban military positions with their US counterparts. The Americans in return told the Iranians what they knew about an Al-Qaeda fixer hiding out in eastern Iran. For a brief moment, it seemed as if this contact might lead to a more general thawing of relations between Iran and the country its leaders refers to as the Great Satan. Back in Tehran, behind closed doors, Soleimani was pronouncing himself pleased with the cooperation and musing at the highest political level that maybe it's time to rethink our relationship with the Americans. This cooperation came to an abrupt halt in January 2002, however, after President George W. Bush used the State of the Union address to throw the book at Iran, branding it a nuclear proliferator, an exporter of terrorism, a repressive state, and part of an axis of evil. Soleimani predictably was apoplectic and cancelled future meetings with the Americans, which was a huge setback. The Islamic Republic's relationship with Syria's Assad regime has deep roots, extending back as far as the Iran-Iraq war, when Bashar al-Assad's father Hafez closed the key oil pipeline in a bid to harm the Iraqi economy. In 2003, the US invasion of Iraq pushed Syria and Iran still closer together, as both regimes realized that if the Americans succeeded in Iraq, they could be next. To damage the US occupation, Soleimani helped Syrian intelligence create pipelines for funneling Sunni jihadis into Iraq. Once there, the jihadis attacked US forces, often using roadside bombs supplied by Soleimani's Quds Force from factories inside Iran. Soleimani soon intervened more directly in Iraq, sending in Shia militias as proxies. Under his leadership, the Quds Force stood up a number of militias for the express purpose of attacking US and allied forces. Collectively, these organizations were responsible for hundreds of coalition deaths. In 2006, at the height of the bloodshed in Iraq, Soleimani took a break from managing Assad and its sister groups in order to supervise another Iranian proxy, Hezbollah, in its escalating war with Israel. During his absence, US commanders in the Green Zone noted a sharp decline in casualties across the country. Upon his return from Lebanon, Soleimani wrote to US commanders, "I hope you have been enjoying the peace and quietness in Baghdad. I've been busy in Beirut." Following the re-establishment of government in Iraq in 2005, Soleimani's influence extended into the country's politics as well. Under the Prime Minister Ibrahim al-Jafari and Nuri Maliki, one of Soleimani's militant proxies, the Ba'ath organization was allowed to become in effect an arm of the state when the Interior and Transport Ministries came under the control of its political wing. Iraq's president from 2005 to 2014, General Talabani, had benefited from IRGC's help as well as that of the CIA when he served as the leader of the Kurdish resistance to Saddam in the 1990s. In early 2008, Soleimani sent General David Petraeus, the then most senior US commander in Iraq, an imperious message. "Dear General David Petraeus, you should be aware that I, Qasem Soleimani, control Iran's policy for Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, and Afghanistan. And indeed, the ambassador in Baghdad is a Quds Force member. The individual who's going to replace him is a Quds Force member." This message was conveyed to General Petraeus via a text message to Talabani's personal cell phone, effectively relegating Talabani to the role of Soleimani's mailman. Legend has it that General Petraeus' reply to Soleimani was, "Dear General Soleimani, go pound sand down a rat hole." Soleimani's habit of taunting US officials did not end with the American withdrawal in 2011. As recently as 2017, the CIA Director Mike Pompeo wrote to Soleimani again, warning him to restrain militias under his command from attacking US interests in Iraq. Soleimani responded, "I will not take your letter nor read it, and I have nothing to say to these people." Following the outbreak of civil war in Syria in 2011, Soleimani ordered some of his Iraqi militias into Syria to defend the Assad regime. For the same purpose, he also set up additional Shia militant groups. This included a group of Afghans resident in Iran, the Fatimiyun Division, and a Pakistani outfit, the Zina Biyun Brigade. Forces under his command were instrumental in many major offensives of the Syrian civil war, including the recapture of Qusay from the rebels. True to form, Soleimani has sought to blend state and insurgent power as seamlessly as possible. The staff at his secret headquarters in Damascus reportedly includes Lebanese and Iraqi militia chieftains working alongside generals from both Iran and Syria. In June 2014, Islamic State forces captured Mosul, a city of nearly 2 million in northern Iraq. In the face of the jihadi advance, tens of thousands of Iraqi troops and federal police doffed their uniforms and melted away. By October 2014, the Islamic State had reached the outskirts of Baghdad and was lobbing mortar rounds at the city's main international airport. In the absence of a credible Iraqi army, someone had to save the capital, and Soleimani's Shia proxies, alongside other militias drawn from other communities, were only too happy to oblige. Soleimani now ordered some of the Iraqi militias tasked with defending Assad to cross back over the border to rescue the Iraqi state. The militants participating in the defense organized themselves into the Popular Mobilization Force, an umbrella organization for coordination with the government in Baghdad. Most of the PMF's constituent groups are Shia, and most of those are aligned in some way with Iran. Although not all fall under Soleimani's direct control, but Soleimani's forces are among the biggest and have seen much of the most intense fighting, often benefiting from US military support to Iraqi troops on the ground. For example, they were pivotal to the retaking of Tikrit in early 2015, during which Soleimani himself was frequently pictured on the front lines. Today, the Islamic State no longer holds any meaningful territory in Iraq, but the PMF has not gone away. As of early 2018, its strength was being estimated around 100,000 to 150,000 fighters, most of them aligned with Iran. Long after the Islamic State's defeat became an inevitability, Prime Minister Abadi was referring to the PMF as the hope of the country and the region. Indeed, Abadi's government further entrenched the PMF's power, making it an independent security force, reporting directly to the Prime Minister's office, a position that by long-standing convention is always held by Shia Muslims. Speaking later that year at the World Economic Forum at Davos, Switzerland, Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi thanked Iran for its prompt deliveries of arms and ammunition, without even asking for immediate payments. He reserved particular praise for Qasem Soleimani, calling him out by name as one of Iraq's most important allies in the fight against the Islamic State. Tehran's biggest concern, however, is maintaining the supply corridor to its important regional and global proxy, the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah. Hezbollah was established in its current form in 1985 with funds and training from Soleimani's IRGC. Its manifesto of that year proclaimed the group's ultimate allegiance to the then supreme leader, Ayatollah Khomeini. Hezbollah has evolved since then, but Iran remains the principal backer. Hassan Nasrallah, the group's Secretary General, said in June 2016, Hezbollah's budget, salaries, expenses, arms, and missiles are coming from the Islamic Republic of Iran. Is this clear? This is no one's business. As long as Iran has money, we have money. Can we be more frank about that? This support is almost as important to Iran as it is to Hezbollah itself. Hezbollah is probably the most important non-state actor in the Middle East today. Without it, Soleimani's Quds Force could not operate abroad in the way it does. And without a strong Quds Force, Iranian power in the region will not be nearly as formidable. To sustain Hezbollah, Iran must maintain supplies to its most significant proxy. But weapons shipment directly into Lebanon are risky because of Israel's naval and air patrol in the region. Thanks to Iran's alliance with Assad, Iranian supply planes land at Damascus International, where their cargo is loaded onto trucks for transshipment over the mountains to Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, a Hezbollah stronghold. This is Iran's and Hezbollah's most important reason for being in Syria.
و همه امادهایی که در فلسطین و لبنان به شهادت رسیدند و در ایران و در جاهای دیگر با توطئه رژیم صهیونیستی به شهادت رسیدند، قصاص خون عماد برچیدن و بنیانکن کردن این رژیم کودککش صهیونیستی است.
Over the years, Soleimani himself developed a particularly close bond with Imad Mughniya, the Hezbollah military chief whom Western and Israeli officials identified as the mastermind behind the 1983 bombing of the US Marine barracks in Beirut, attacks on US embassies in the Lebanese capital and in Kuwait City, also in 1983, the 1985 hijacking of TWA Flight 847, in which a US Navy diver was beaten and murdered, and the bombing of the Israeli embassy and the Jewish community center in Buenos Aires in 1992 and 1994 respectively. Mughniya's ability to destroy large buildings with truck bombs later became the template for Al-Qaeda's 1998 attack on the US embassies in East Africa. Mughniya went into hiding around 1995, but Mossad tracked him down more than a decade later when he was passing through Damascus. In February 2008, Mossad reportedly had an opportunity to assassinate Mughniya, but held back because at the crucial moment, the target was hugging a longtime friend, whom the agency was not legally authorized to kill. That friend was Qasem Soleimani. Mughniya was killed in a second attempt later that day. But under Soleimani's close guidance, Hezbollah has continued to operate a highly effective paramilitary wing. The exact extent of Iran's support for Hezbollah remains unclear. But in 2010, the Obama administration estimated that it amounts to between $100 million to $200 million per year. In 2009, the Israeli Navy intercepted a vessel carrying arms apparently bound for Hezbollah from Bandar Abbas, Iran's main seaport, a shipment that included 3,000 rockets, 9,000 mortar rounds, 20,000 hand grenades, and over 500,000 rounds of small arms ammunition. In Syria, Hezbollah has proved invaluable to its sponsors in Damascus and Tehran. It began by sending military advisors to Soleimani's other Shia militias, but its fighters soon became actively involved in some of the bloodiest fighting, especially near the Lebanese border. Hezbollah undoubtedly changed the balance of the Syrian conflict in favor of Assad and therefore of Iran, but it has come at a terrible cost. The group's estimated nearly 2,000 dead in Syria may represent as much as 10% or more of its global fighting strength. The dead included very senior figures. At one point, Soleimani was overseeing a crack unit and mentoring one of the most prominent members, Jihad Mughniya, the 23-year-old son of Soleimani's old friend, the terrorist mastermind Imad Mughniya, who was killed by the CIA and Mossad in 2008. Soleimani was not slow to show his gratitude for Hezbollah's sacrifice. He made it a point of visiting the graves and families of the fallen. In January 2015, he was pictured reading the Quran alone at the flower-scattered tombs of Hezbollah fighters, including Jihad Mughniya. Reuters reported that in mid-October 2019, Major General Qassem Soleimani met with his Iraqi Shiite militias allies at a villa on the banks of the Tigris River, looking across at the US Embassy complex in Baghdad. Soleimani instructed his top ally in Iraq, Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis, and other powerful militia leaders to step up attacks on US targets in the country, using sophisticated new weapons provided by Iran. The strategy session came as mass protests against Iran's growing influence in Iraq were gaining momentum, putting the Islamic Republic in an unwelcome spotlight. Soleimani's plans to attack US forces aimed to provoke a military response that will redirect that rising anger towards the United States. 2 weeks before the October meeting, Soleimani ordered Iranian Revolutionary Guards to move more sophisticated weapons, such as the Katyusha rockets and shoulder-fired missiles that could bring down helicopters to Iraq through 2 border crossings. At the Baghdad villa, Soleimani told the assembled commanders to form a new militia group of low-profile paramilitaries, unknown to the United States, who could carry out rocket attacks on Americans housed at Iraqi military bases. He ordered Kataib Hezbollah, a force founded by Muhandis and trained in Iran, to direct the new plan. Soleimani told them such a group would be difficult to detect by the Americans. Before the attacks, the US intelligence community had reason to believe that Soleimani was involved in late-stage planning to strike Americans in multiple countries, including Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. Muhandis, a former Iraqi lawmaker, oversaw Iraq's Popular Mobilization Force (PMF), an umbrella group of paramilitary forces mostly consisting of Iran-backed Shiite militias that was formally integrated into Iraq's armed forces. Muhandis, like Soleimani, had long been on the radar of the United States, which had declared Muhandis a terrorist. In 2007, a Kuwaiti court sentenced him to death in absentia for his involvement in the 1983 US and French embassy bombings in Kuwait. Soleimani picked Kataib Hezbollah to lead the attack on US forces in the region because it had the capability to use drones to scout for targets. Kataib Hezbollah used the drones to gather aerial footage of locations where US troops were deployed, according to 2 Iraqi security officials who monitored the movement of militias. On December 11, 2019, a senior US military official said attacks by Iranian-backed groups on bases hosting US forces in Iraq were increasing and becoming more sophisticated, pushing all sides closer to an uncontrollable escalation. His warning came 2 days after 4 Katyusha rockets struck a base near Baghdad International Airport, wounding 5 members of Iraq's Allied Counterterrorism Service unit. No group claimed responsibility for the attack, but the US military officials said intelligence and forensic analysis of the rockets and launchers pointed to Iranian-backed Shiite Muslim militia groups, notably Kataib Hezbollah and Asaib al-Ahaq. On December 27, more than 30 rockets were fired at an Iraqi military base near the northern Iraq city of Kirkuk. The attack killed a US civilian contractor and wounded 4 Americans and 2 Iraqi servicemen. Washington accused Kataib Hezbollah of carrying out the attack, an allegation it denied. The United States then launched airstrikes 2 days later against the militias, killing at least 25 militia fighters and wounding 55. The attack sparked 2 days of violent protests by supporters of Iranian-backed Iraqi paramilitary groups, who stormed the US embassy's perimeter and hurled rocks, prompting Washington to dispatch extra troops to the region and threaten reprisals attacks against Iran. The US Defense Secretary Mark Esper warned that the United States might have to take preemptive actions to protect American lives from expected attacks by Iran-backed militias. Soleimani's effort ended up provoking the US attack on Friday, 3rd of January 2020, that killed him and Mohandes, marking a major escalation of tensions between the United States and Iran. The 2 men died in airstrikes on their convoy at the Baghdad airport as they headed to the capital, dealing a major blow to the Islamic Republic and the Iraqi paramilitary groups it supports. Soleimani might be gone out of the scene, but his influence and role in the Middle East, including all the militia groups he has created, will last for generations to come.